Hello, selectors, and welcome to the Life Burst Podcast.
Life Burst Podcast!
Where we talk about...
the Wixoss things.
The Wixoss things.
That's
and
right, only the Wixoss things.
All the Wixoss things. Mm-hmm. Today's going to be a pretty cool episode, I think, Tiffany. I think this is going to go down as one of our stronger episodes.
Oh my goodness. You're going to build us up early.
Yeah, man. Got to build this up. Today we're going to be talking about super archetypes. That's stuff like combo, aggro, control, what defines them, and what do they mean specifically in Wixoss, because I think a lot of people have issues trying to define exactly what control means, exactly what midrange means in Wixoss.
Yeah, well, especially because it varies from game to game, and I think that the terms that we associate with Wixoss will differ from the same words that you would associate with a different game.
Right.
So we're going to go over it today.
Yeah, and as for our question of the day, comment of the day, you guys, again, comment down below what you think about it. What is your favorite type of Wixoss super archetype? Like, what do you prefer doing? Do you like playing aggro? Do you like playing control? Do you like playing midrange? Let us know down in the comments below.
Give you 3 guesses what my favorite kind is.
Aggro, and aggro.
The answer will surprise you.
So, yeah, and to highlight some comments, because we said we were going to do that last time around, is we were going to talk about some comments that we got. And the comment that I thought was really interesting that we got last week was from Thought Prism. He said that his favorite life burst was the Chandelier life burst, which I think is pretty unique. I don't maybe Blanket also has that life burst. I can't remember, but the life burst is that you can take a Signy out of your trash and put it in your hand, and you can put a spell out of your trash and put it in your hand.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and like I said, that's like basically like draw 2, but you get a wider variety of stuff you can take.
Well, doesn't like Projection Map have something kind of similar? Or no, that's its enter ability.
That's its enter ability.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
and it's like specifically a white
Signy. Yeah.
White Signy.
So way more restrictive. But yeah, so I think that's a cool life burst myself, personally.
Yeah, I think that was a really good addition to the conversation. So thank you, Thought Prism.
Let's get into... Actually, today's broadcast is brought to you by Lucky Yuki.
Well, it's not brought to you by Lucky Yuki, but we will always plug Lucky Yuki Customs, because these are fantastic.
Yeah, we got some customs in the mail today for the newborn Bang. And we got the nurse edition where she's a zombie nurse, which is super cute. And we also got the normal version, but it's got like a texture on it this time around.
It's like raised. It kind of reminds me of like the not Diva Rare, but like the secret rares of the Lyrigs.
Yeah.
Where it's like textured. I love it. It's so cool.
Yeah, it really is. I'm looking at it with the sun reflecting the background behind me, and it's very cool.
It's really cool. I like it a lot. But I gotta say, this like reimagining of Bang being a nurse and like swinging at you with a gigantic syringe, it's so cool. Like the minute I saw this, I was like, holy moly, this is amazing. Look at this design.
Yeah, she's already got the vial motif going, so
yeah,
cool
it makes
too.
a lot of sense. Also, like the red colors work really well with her like overall green and purple. It's just really nice.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lucky.
Of course, yeah, and if you guys ever want to join in Lucky Yuki's monthly customs, then you can do so.
They have a
links
Patreon,
down
right?
below.
Yeah.
Patreon down below.
Check out the links.
All right, let's actually jump into it.
All right, let's do it.
All right, so here's the reasons, Tiffany, why I think knowing what super archetypes are and what direction they pull you in can help you. I think they can help you, and I think they can hurt you. If you say that you are strictly an aggro deck, you are taking away the ability to pull from all these other different game philosophies, and maybe make advantage your deck because of it. So I don't think you should be narrow-minded and always classify your deck as, I'm the aggro deck, that's it, that's all I've got, period, right? But I think that it can help you having deck clarification, right? So if you're like, my job is to be aggressive, I'm being an aggro deck, and you look at some of the things that you're doing and you're like, I'm really starting to trend into mid-range, and I'm starting to lose my games because I'm losing my speed, right? knowing what your deck is trying to do, I think, is an important role, and that's why classifying your decks might help you.
Yeah. I mean, it also makes it easier if you're like a new player coming in and you kind of have an idea of what decks you like to play. Knowing how they kind of operate in Wecross will make that transition a little bit easier for you.
And I think it does also it can help you playing Wecross too, because if you look at your opponent's deck and you go, yeah, this is a mid-range deck. And as a mid-range deck, I know it's going to be focusing on this. Even if you don't know the specific cards that they're playing, you can get a general idea of what game plan they're going after.
Mm-hmm. So what's the first one we're going to talk about? Wait, how many do we have?
I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and
Okay.
Theoretically an 8th if we have time for it. But
Ooh.
I have 7 right now.
All right, let's get into the first one.
Aggro. I think aggro is the most reasonable one. I don't think it's one dimensional like I think some people think, but I think aggro is the one of the premier ones at Wecross, because Wecross is innately a more aggressive game than I think other card games are. Right? You win by crushing life cloth and then winning, which means even the most defensive deck at some point needs to have some aggression in it.
Well, also like a lot of the gameplay is very much dependent on board state. So I think that aggro interacts the most directly with that, with swinging with Signy and blasting through them, and all that stuff. Things like Lancer, where like it'll still interact with the Signy while also trying to crush a life cloth. Like all these things, it's just really innate to the game.
Right.
If you've been a long time listener, you've probably heard us talk about this before.
Yeah, and you I think hit a key point here, which is Wecross is a game of board states, right? It's really a game of board states, not interaction, where you're trying to create the strongest board state that you possibly can at whatever your focus is. So a lot of the stuff is focused on board state. And for each archetype, we're going to go over like a metaphor of how the game like the mindset of that gamer, the goal of the deck, the main actions you do to achieve the goal, the secondary actions you do to achieve the goal, and then some examples from actual Wecross as to what they are. So the aggro mindset should be that you're like blitzing in a football game, right? That like you're focusing down one specific goal. That's just the quarterback, right? The one person who's playing the game, and you're just trying to get as much damage in there as possible. Your main action is going to be open up lanes, right? There's 3 lanes that you can open up, maximize how much damage you can do per turn. So you're going to attack down those lanes. Your secondary actions, and this is what I am saying, that like even aggro isn't a one-dimensional deck. It still has other things it wants to do. And secondary actions would be to disrupt your opponent. Make them discard cards, maybe enter burn them, or color screw them off of a certain color. And then the other one, and this is a little bit harder to define one, is to be difficult to disrupt. Right? So like
what does that mean, really?
Yeah. So like Tengu, for example, has an ability where it can't be downed by an opponent's effect, which means that it can't be stopped attacking in that way.
There it is. And that makes sense.
And so I think that is a good example of something that's like, I'm going to be aggressive regardless of what you're trying to do. And then that's the goal. So again, your primary action is to get up to 4 damage a turn, right? That's your goal, is to maximize your damage output at all costs, basically. That's the thing that you should be focusing on. Whereas its secondary actions are like, it'd be cool if I can disrupt my opponent, because if I can disrupt them, then what does that do? That enables me to attack. If my opponent can't stop the damage, then I'm winning the game. So you again, the focus is less on disrupting your opponent's full stop and more on it's supporting my attacking plan. Same thing with being hard to disrupt. I'm supporting my attacking plan by being hard to disrupt.
Yeah, and I mean that's kind of why you'll see aggro just go so fast, because like you said, they're just blitzing through everything. So I think that's a really good analogy.
Yeah, and being hard to disrupt too, there's other ways to do it too. Like for example, Shadow probably seems more like a defensive ability, but it can be utilized offensively for these aggro decks. For example, Mirai doesn't have Shadow, in the Ot deck, right, that we just put out on our channel.
Make sure you take a listen.
But Mirai has an ability. I think Autumn Song was the one who actually brought this up in one of our comments. Has an ability that it can't be vanished by the effects of level 1 Signy.
That's all effects.
Which
it's
means,
not just. It's not just removal.
Which means life bursts, right? Mm-hmm. So Mirai is actually kind of a cool aggro tool if you think about it, because what it means is that if you attack with something else and you leave Mirai back, and they hit we hit a Sita life burst, right, which will vanish 8,000 or below. Sita's a level 1. It can't affect the Mirai, meaning that you'll still be able to attack with the Mirai no matter what. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of one of the reasons why it would be difficult to. We're talking about difficult to interact with Signy.
Yeah. What else?
Well, let's talk about aggro a bit. We talked about like what makes it, right? Mm-hmm. But like you said, why is it quintessential in Wixoss? Why does it really seem to shine in Wixoss? I mean, we have the Hirana deck that is super good right now, but then we also have and the Towel deck before that, right? Towel was the best deck in the pre-early meta.
Yeah, the mono red Towel.
And then in their next one, where a lot of people are theorizing, X is going to be the best deck. Mm-hmm. All of them are basically red. The same deck, right?
Mm-hmm. They're all aggro. I mean, also, this isn't... I mean, we're using red as, like, the main color for aggro because it is the main color of aggro, but there are other colors of aggro as well.
Sure, totally. There's mono white builds. X is black, red. Deus has a aggro build that can
you
be
could
red
do green, you could do black, yeah.
But so why is it that aggro leads itself to in Wixoss, like lends itself to being just always one of the best decks in Wixoss?
Because Wixoss is just a more aggressive game, and we said that earlier, so that's why.
You got it.
Like that's it's not. I don't know. I don't think it's that much deeper. Am I wrong? Like it's just that it's just an aggressive game.
Yeah.
So you want an aggressive deck, and then 2 doses of aggressive equals wins.
Yeah.
Most times.
I mean, so let's like if we break it down to the less obvious nuances, it's just that it's easier to win in Wixoss with damage than it is in most other games. You have to hit the opponent 8 times, right? In Magic, you have to hit the opponent some amount of times that equals the power of 20. Mm-hmm. And that's just harder when you're playing 2/2s, right? That means if you're playing 2/2s, you have to hit the opponent 10 times to win. It's just more difficult to do that in other games. So aggro has always going to be relevant because it doesn't take that much to kill your opponent. That's why one of the reasons why most games of Wixoss is quicker than other games too. Mm-hmm. The examples that I got for it is Hirana's mono red is just a good example of a deck that's just constantly clearing lanes and attacking down, but it has some amount of disruption in card discard and some amount of disruption in Enerburn. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the key examples of a good aggro card, aside from Tengu, which we talked about being hard to interact with, would be like Hera, right?
Yeah.
Hera Lancelot's a great card, but it's just a generically good card. Hera is its sister that is more aggressive because it does it on attack, and because it does a lane opening on attack.
It means that you get 2 attacks in instead of just 1, because you can remove a Signy and then attack through a lane. It's basically like a on-demand Lancer.
Yeah, and you're right. It's repeatable too, which is the thing. And it's got a weird timing, so it deprives the opponent of Ener. It is slightly disruptive. Mm-hmm. It's deceptively disruptive.
It also happens it happens after their attack or defense step, because it's on attack. Mm-hmm. So you declare attacks, and then they have, you declare attacks, and then you have your triggers on your side, and then they have the defense step, and then it goes back to your attack. So, you could give you can give a Signy Lancer, and then on their defense step they can remove it. With Hera, not so much. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So here is what I think about aggro. Aggro ends up being a little bit of its weaknesses are control decks. Mm-hmm. Because control decks function differently in Wixoss than they do in other games. In other games, most other games, control decks, their weakness is aggro, actually. It's the other way around.
Ooh.
But in this one, because control decks, like we'll talk about in a second, mitigate damage, it ends up being very hard for them to win against that type of deck. On the flip end, they're actually quite strong against mid-range decks. And the reason is because mid-range decks don't necessarily put a good defensive strategy out there, or at least not a super strong defensive strategy out there. They're also strong against tempo, because tempo ends up being a little bit more of a late game deck in this. So
you think aggro is good against tempo?
Yeah, I do.
I respectfully disagree.
Okay, tell me why.
Because of the speed. Like there's not as much longevity in a lot of aggro decks as there is in other forms of decks. So the likelihood of other types of decks such as tempo, mid-range, control is to basically like outlast the speed of a Wixoss aggro deck. And we've seen this multiple times. So, sorry. I don't mean to straight up disagree with you.
No, it's fine. It's great. I'm good that we have differences of opinion here. I think that aggro probably beats tempo because tempo is an aggressive deck but is also slightly slower. Therefore, it just loses the race. That's my thought process. But you might be right to say that it interacts with the aggressive deck better and therefore allows it just enough interaction to stop the aggro deck from being able to win. I don't know the answer. I think that's a very valid point.
Yeah, let us know what you think in the comments below.
Let's talk about the complete opposite end of the aggro spectrum, which is control. And then we'll talk about mid-range, which is kind of in between, as the name states. Control in a lot of other card games is considered like the deck that doesn't let the opponent play. I don't think that statement is correct for control and Wixoss. Because there's really it's not, like we said before, not really a format of interaction, is it?
Yeah, it just like there's not a whole lot of ways for you to directly impact your opponent's turn. You either do it on your turn before or you try and undo what they did or push forward more on your turn. And then the only time that you get to have any sort of interaction is the defense step, which is limited in its abilities.
Yeah, totally. So what I think would be better as a mindset for a control player is to be, and I learned this term on one of our interviews, a floodgate controller.
Ooh, what does that mean?
If you look at each lane, each of your 3 lanes as like channels that water can rush down from. And at any point in time, you're supposed to push a button and close that gate. Stop the water from being able to get in, right? You're a floodgate controller.
That's an interesting analogy.
Then that's all you're trying to do. You're not trying to control everything the opponent does. You're not this... I think a lot of people have this idea that control is this mastermind that's like, I've planned the game 7 turns and you've fallen into my trap bond.
Basically like Megamind, Blue and Big Head.
Spider. I don't think control does that. I think control actually is just like, and this is the goal that I put down. The goal is to make the game go long and and just minimize damage. You're just trying not to take damage.
Yeah. Yeah, that really is the is how control plays the game. It's like nope, hit. Nope, hit. You guys get it.
And the funny
if
thing
you've
about
played
that,
against control, you know exactly what it feels like. Yeah.
And the funny thing about that is you'll notice that I didn't even say a way to win. I just said don't lose. That's literally what I just said. Is the goal of control is to not lose.
Yeah. Well, in that way, that it actually really is the opposite of aggro, because aggro's goal is to win and win quickly, and control's goal is to just not lose
for a while. And so that's the main action, like I said here, is a full defensive game plan to minimize damage. So you're just trying to figure out ways to not lose the game. And then your secondary actions should be exhaust your opponent's resources, right? Try to maybe try to exhaust their deck, try to exhaust their hand, try to exhaust their enter, right? And then, again, I put this down as a secondary action, present a win condition to eventually win the game. Because your goal is to stabilize before it is to win.
Right.
So that's what defines a control deck in Wixoss, is that it's just like, I'm not losing until I start winning.
Yeah. So we know that blue is more akin to things like control, but what other colors do you think have a really good control ability?
White is actually very good at it, right? I mean,
it is very good at it.
We have the staple deck that I think everyone's thinking about right now, which is Nova.
Dun dun dun.
Because Nova puts out, we make jokes about it all the time on stream, right? The Great Wall of Nova. It just puts out all these Signy that are obscenely high stats.
And heavy.
And they all they do is sit there to soak up damage, and then when your opponent attacks with an L-Rig, you go guard. Guard recursion,
right.
guard
recursion.
You're just stopping the game from
Yeah,
existing.
when you're playing Nova, you really play with something more like 8 cards.
Right, and every turn you're like, all right, cool, let me see. Okay, I found one Signy that can do a damage, great. Like, that's it, right?
Yeah.
Like, you're like, okay, I take 2 turns off, then I find another
That's
Signy
why
that does
those
damage.
games go so long, too.
Yeah.
No one's in a rush.
Well,
Or Nova's not
Nova's
in a
not
rush.
in a rush.
Hirana's like, hurry up.
But I did want to pull out an old combo you and I used to talk about a lot, just because it's an example that's not in the colors you'd think of for it to be a control colors, right?
Lay
we
it
think
on me.
control, we think blue and white.
Yep.
Here's a black and green card that does it. So you've got Gap, right?
Oh, yeah.
And Gap's ability is allows you to grab a Signy from your trash and put it into play. Mm-hmm. And then you've got No-Berry Betsu.
Weird bear,
as we like to call it. And No-Berry Betsu has the ability to grab a Signy from the enter zone and put it into play. Mm-hmm. So what ends up happening is if there's an open lane, so when they use some removal to open up a lane, you can go ahead and swap No-Berry Bets and Gap from the enter. They swap positions, and then Gap comes into play, and then you can use Gap's ability to bring something back from your trash to the empty lane. So you fill out all your lanes this way. So that's another option to be like, yeah, this is just me exerting the I'm closing the floodgate. Which is a great way for us to now talk about midrange, which falls somewhere in between.
Midrange is such a fun way to play, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a very
I really like it.
super flexible way to play, right? And that's why I struggled trying to figure out a mindset to think about when we're talking about this. But eventually I came to a decision, and it's a weird one. It's like playing a game of chess.
Yep.
You're looking at the board. You're figuring what's my next move based on what my opponent's doing, and you're trying to play that type of thing.
Yep.
Your goal is to create a strong board presence at all points in time to present the strongest board presence that you can, and then eventually win with attacks. So it's still aggressive, like you're still trying to win.
Yeah, it's just like aggro with a telescope. Because what you're really trying to aggro is very in the moment. And we've talked about this before, where aggro does think ahead, but only in the terms of how much damage can I do, whether I do it this turn or the next turn. And midrange is a little different, because you're not thinking 6 turns ahead. You're really only thinking 1 to 2.5. And with those things in mind, you're really just maximizing what you can do with your turn right now, and still planning for what you will need to do 2 turns from now.
And I love that you said that, because when we were talking about the what are Wixoss super archetypes, I said midrange, blah blah blah, and I kept not finding the right words for it, and you said maximize your turn.
Yeah, and I really ended up learning that when I switched from Lion to Musica, because those are 2 completely different ways of playing. And I think it's safe to say that Musica is more of a mid-range deck. I was just like, I really don't get it. I don't understand why I keep losing with this deck. I know it's a good deck, and I know I'm a good player. And then you said, just maximize every turn. And I was like, oh, okay. And then that's when all that clicked for me. So that's how Midrange thinks about their turns.
Right. Its main action is to create a board presence that has a strong offense, but not at the cost of defense. Right? That's what makes it different from aggro, is because it is looking forward in the game and not just how quickly can I go.
Yeah.
So you like well-balanced stats, for example.
Yeah, it's exactly what the name says. It's mid-range.
Your secondary actions is you're going to value power over speed. Power is a really strong thing to talk about here because we're talking about individually strong cards, and yes, you might play cards that interact well with each other, but you probably wouldn't play cards that interact well with each other and are completely bad on their own.
Yeah.
You play cards that are good on its own, and really good when they're together. Good example of that would be something like Dark Energy, which charges if it kills a Signy, or if a Signy dies, and Osagetsune, because Osagetsune can kill Signy if there's an enter charge, so they can power each other.
Yeah, and we're also not talking about like big powered Signy in terms of like their power number. What is that called? I want to call it like
It's called the power.
like toughness, and that's the magic term
just
for it.
power.
Power
It's
and
just power.
okay. Yeah, we're not talking about Signies that just are like gigantically powered, like your 10,000 level 2s, or like something like Chandelier that's like 13 for no reason. So we're talking about powerful abilities as well as good defensive skills.
Yeah, and I think when we're talking about like the secondary action, the other secondary action that you can have is have a flexible game plan that can interact even on a simple level with everything, right? That's why I like cards like Madoka Clap, which could be used in control decks as well, but Madoka Clap interacts with almost everything.
Yeah, I mean, you can down almost anything.
Yeah.
Except that one card we mentioned earlier that
Exactly,
can't be down.
that's why the aggro likes that kind of card.
Yeah.
But again, this is sort of like what you're trying to do, and the best card that I could think of that exemplifies that, like, just kind of interacts with everything, has really good stats, is just an overall good card, is Exia from the next set. Right? It
Spoilers.
at the end of the turn, it ups everything, so it dunks on freeze. It
Dunks on. That's a
Yeah,
funny
yeah.
phrase.
And then it also is really good on the defense. It closes down attacks, and has really respectable stats. And its baseline ability for its life burst is actually pretty strong on its own too. So it is just an overall balanced, very good card for all points in the game. And then the example for the deck that I put down is exactly what you said, Musica. Right, and you were a music player for a while, so you can.
I was a music player for a
You
while.
were a music player for a while,
Which is hilarious because they're a dance team.
but Musica has two abilities that are extremely flexible and balanced, right? And that is being able to salvage a card from the trash,
From the future.
And then also being able to replay a Elrig,
An Elrig,
sister
yes.
Elrig, right? And because of that,
Or a level 1 Elrig, yeah.
yeah. Because of that, you can basically go, what's best for my next couple turns?
And also, like, what's best for my next couple turns, but also making those decisions as in, do I double grow Sangha now? Or do I want to wait on growing her level 2 so I can save her to regrow later? So it's things like that, whereas aggro would have been like, yeah, I'm going to just do it all now because I've got one open lane and, like, why not?
You're telling me that I can get Lancer and deal damage? Great, I'm in.
We're in, all in. And then control would be like, I will definitely wait on regrowing Sangha, or I will definitely wait on regrowing Madoka.
Right.
So it's that there's the difference.
Control's
for you.
probably like, I need more cards in order to make sure my defense is absolute, right? Whereas, so it'll be like, I'm definitely doing float. Whereas mid-range goes, I will use either.
Yeah.
one on whatever situation.
What do I need right now, and what will I need like a turn from now?
Yeah.
And this isn't to say that like one major archetype is superior than the other. We're just saying that they tend to think a little differently.
Yeah, and mid-range, for example, has its other name that a lot of people use is good stuff or junk. It's just that you shuffle a pile of junk together, and it's great.
Wait, that doesn't mean it's good stuff.
I think that's the joke, but yeah, it's good stuff is the other name for it, where you're just like, these are a bunch of generically good cards that do generically good things, and I win a game eventually.
And we have said that before, like specifically about the Musica deck, is that it's mid-range, but it's also a good stuff deck.
Right, which is, you brought up an interesting thing too. You were like, is the new we made, is that a mid-range deck or is that a ramp deck? And we'll talk about ramp in a second. And the answer is, it can be a hybrid. It can be a hybrid of both.
Yeah.
Like some of these things, like you can be a hybrid of lean on either one of these strategies.
Lean on me.
I think innately the deck is a mid-range deck first that has some tendencies to ramp.
It's got some extra flavor.
Because it's like that good stuff, right? That we were just like, these are just generically good cards.
Yeah. All right. What's next?
Let's talk about ramp since we were just talking about
Yeah. So ramp as in liftoff, as in double ollie in the parking lot.
Card names, right? Like I said, junk. Have a weird lineage from whatever card game they're from, and the term ramp comes from rampant growth in Magic the Gathering.
From that one green card.
Yes. Which allowed you to that's our dog saying hello.
Sorry.
Which allows you to get more mana, the equivalent of enter in this game, and play more expensive things. So that's where the terms ramp. But I like ramp too because it also feels like you're ramping up for something big.
Yeah, I think the phrase fits it really well. It also is a distinction from all the other kinds of like archetypes because it will have feelings of other archetypes, but it still feels distinctly its own.
Yeah, and that
it's sort of like a tertiary color.
Right, so the mindset, right, of a ramp player is different than the mindset of this is why I liked the mindset stuff, because it helps you visualize what you're trying to achieve in this battle. And the ramp is often associated with mid-range. But not really, because mid-range tries to figure out what's the best board state it could possibly do, like a chess player. Whereas a ramp player is more like Goku charging a Kamehameha blast.
While people are attacking
him. While people are attacking him, exactly. Right? Like, it actually cares much less about its life than you'd think. Because here's in Wixoss, especially.
It's like charging up a photon blaster.
Yeah, in Wixoss especially, the more you get damaged, the more ramp you have.
Exactly, because most of the time, the Signy that get vanished from your field go into your enter zone via flow.
So again, the idea for ramp is to charge up. So you're really just enter charging, and then using higher costed big plays that you could possibly do. Right, that's your goal of the deck. You're either doing that in one really big play, like a big flash, or you're doing it in many medium-sized increments, and that's helping you out. So the way that you can do that is just your main action is just enter charge, just period, enter charge.
Enter charge.
And then the secondary actions is you want to play Signy as chump blockers. And there's a very specific thing.
Big ones.
Not big ones.
Not big ones.
Not big ones. Why?
Because you don't care if they get banished or not.
Exactly. That's why
the more they get banished, the more enter you have.
The more enter you have. So actually, ramp very rarely wants to play big walls because even though it's defensive, and it would like to live longer to get more enter accrued, it is less worried about losing Life Cloth or Signy on the field than most decks are. Because you're just supplying more enter for it to go off bigger next turn.
Yep, exactly.
And the examples we pulled were in the Senga deck specifically. The reason why...
Senga Center.
Yeah, Senga Center and Musica Center are very close to what they do. But I would categorize Musica as a mid-range deck and Senga as a ramp deck. Because Senga does enter charge quite a bit, by the way. And a card that I've really been liking in that Senga deck is Nightmare Step.
Really?
Senga is...
It's so expensive.
Exactly, but we've played a lot of games against Senga at this point.
Yeah.
What's the one thing that we always look at the end of the game at? We're like, why do you have I have had games where I've been
We've, like, made
what's
comments
in your discard
about that
pile again?
before.
And then them been like, that's my enter pile. And you're like, that's too much enter. If you're not spending that enter, what the hell are you doing with it?
Also, just side note, can I say something?
Yeah.
Please never, ever, 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 ever stack your enter. Don't you dare. It's supposed to be visible and public how much enter you have. I don't care if you have 30 enter. Okay, you gotta lay it all out for your opponent.
There's no amount of enter burn that I'm doing at that point that's gonna make it do its thing.
I'm really sorry if that was blown out. I'm very passionate about that. Like, you can't do that.
Look, Wixoss is a game of board states, so you want the board accurately represented. I think that's fair.
Anyways, moving on.
But that's a good way to do it. And then the medium-sized thing that I was talking about is enter charge Osagetsune. Enter charge Osagetsune. Like, that's a good way to spend in medium-sized chunks of enter.
Mm-hmm. Wait, so are there other colors associated with ramp, or do you think it's really only primarily green right now?
Red and blue to a certain extent.
Does red and blue have enter charge stuff?
Red does. Blue does not. But blue's version of enter charge is I'm making the game go so long that as you vanish all of my Signy, I will have a ton of enter to work with.
That makes sense. And we've also had like comments, like we've commented at each other, like getting into like turn 5 where we're like, oh, that's, you're welcome for all that enter, and then you'll say something like skip enter phase, and I'm like, yeah, you will. Like, you've got like 10 enter. What have you got going on?
So let's talk about tempo. Apparently a highly controversial topic here on our stuff.
Yep. Hot takes, Wixoss hot takes.
But tempo's a really, really, really hard one. We've talked about this even on the podcast in the past. It's hard to describe.
It is hard to describe.
So I actually think tempo in Wixoss, this is me deck theorying here, so bear with me. You guys can have different opinions, and that's fine. I think that that tempo is the foil to aggro. I know that we said the opposite of aggro is control, but I think tempo is the foil of it, because tempo almost looks like an aggro deck when you view it from above, but the game plan is ever so slightly different. Mm-hmm. A tempo deck should feel like a game of Jenga, where you are pulling out blocks from your opponent, right, to try to make it so that way you're setting up their turn to be terrible. Mm-hmm. And you're putting your blocks in an advantageous position that will set you up for success later down the line.
Yeah, I think when we talked about this before, we kind of thought about it like if you have a plus on one side and a minus on one side.
Yeah.
And you are on the plus side and your opponent's on the minus side. You always want to have this like sliding scale where it's always coming up in your favor.
And push the opponent towards that negative.
And pushing the opponent towards the negative.
Right. And the wordage that I like a lot with tempo is disrupt your opponent long enough to steal a win. It really almost feels like every time you win with tempo, it almost feels like you stole it from the jaws of defeat, because you're doing it very narrowly. Right? There's a very small window for you to win in, which is why tempo decks, generally speaking, are more aggressive, because they have to be. But the main actions is exploit your opponent's weakness in their deck structure. And then you cause them to stumble.
Right.
Right? And then the secondary actions is open up lanes and attack aggressively. That's the primary action of an aggro deck.
And see, this is kind of where I was talking about that I think tempo actually tends to perform very well against aggro. Because aggro, while it tries to be built to be difficult to disrupt, once it is disrupt in its gameplay, it's kind of hard to recover because it's going so quickly.
It has such a limited scope.
Yeah, that the moment that aggro is slowed down by an opponent, you as an aggro player, you have to recover that very quickly, otherwise you will fall behind for the rest of the game, which is what tempo wants you to do.
Yeah, and that actually goes into what the other thing that you're doing as your secondary effect with tempo, which is you probably want to strike at key moments, right? You want to, if your opponent's got a Madoka Clap, the key number for Madoka Clap is 5 enter, 2 cards in hand, right? And if you make it so that way you drop that card count down to 1, or you drop that enter down to 4, right? You're not obliterating their play, but you're just making it tough for them.
Mm-hmm.
So you can just do like almost like chi attacks, like cha cha cha, cha 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 cha.
Chi attacks.
Yeah, like when you're blocking,
like Ty Lee
blocking
from
chi
Avatar.
Yeah, you're just making it difficult for your opponent to deal with you. You're not obliterating them. You're just creating small windows of opportunity.
You want to strike at the opportune moment.
Cha, cha. That's me striking at the opportune moment. Cha, cha.
Aren't you guys so glad we're audio only?
Hey, some good examples of this is Ray, the deck currently No Limit, plays a lot like this. It's very, very, very aggressive, but it plays way more disruption than you'd think.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, they have a lot of like draw and discard.
Right.
So that's kind of where you can see the tempo sliding scale.
Yeah.
Sliding scale, where you're gaining an advantage as a Ray player and you're disadvantaging your opponent.
Yeah. And Hijikata is also a good example of that because it's aggressive, but it also makes your opponent discard, and the emphasis here is at random. You're hoping to snag a guard with it. Let's talk about the last two. I'm going to say combo for last because I think that's the one I'm a little bit most passionate about.
Ooh.
Let's talk about stacks.
What on earth is that?
Okay, again, with the
honestly...
history of card games and stuff. Stacks is a term coming from Magic, which comes from a deck that included a card in it called Smokestacks.
Mr. Encyclopedia, teach me.
I played lots of card games.
Honestly, though, this is like... You're probably not going to hear the stacks term very often. I don't know very many people that even really use it as a category.
Yeah, I know.
Is it new as of Magic the Gathering?
It's super old in Magic the Gathering, but it's just not a common deck type in most card games. But it is in Wixoss. I've seen it a lot, and a lot of people confuse control and stacks. But they're slightly different.
Okay, so what is it?
But stacks focuses, like even in those other card games, stacks focuses a lot on the board state, trying to make it hard for your opponent to do anything, basically, right? And that's like Wixoss. Wixoss is all about board state.
Right.
So the metaphor for stacks should be you're waiting for your opponent to die of old age. And I know that it feels like that in Nova sometimes, but there's a key difference in it. Which is the goal for a stacks deck is to stall out the game long enough for the opponent to be out of gas and you eventually win.
So this is really more of a game of attrition.
Correct. Nova is not actually a game of attrition.
No.
Nova is a game of damage mitigation. Oh. But Tamago Freeze is a game of attrition.
Oh, for sure. That's so annoying.
And that's the key difference between those
But
two.
Tamago Freeze is not control?
No,
because I thought that control was also trying to have a long game and like always tell your opponent no, basically. Right. No, you can't have damage. No, you can't use your Signy.
See, and that's the difference, is because control is not saying no to everything. Control is only saying no to damage. That's its focus. It's damage mitigation. Stacks, on the other hand, just makes it really hard for your opponent to do stuff. It's a little more proactive in it's not saying no, it's tying things down, right? And that's where the goal is to stall out the game long enough for the opponent to run out of gas. But the main actions is wall up with large statted Signy and stall them out of the game. It's not talking about damage mitigation. It's talking about proactively putting up ways to not mitigate damage, but to hopefully stop damage in its tracks.
Gotcha.
And its secondary actions really shine here because they tax the opponent's resources, often through things like freeze or actually taxing effects.
So like projection map, which would actually tax something.
Correct. Okay. Or more like Penlight, which taxes the opponent in order to attack with its Elrig.
I have a personal vendetta against that card. Personal.
Or there's also cards out there that tax the opponent for casting spells, There's
Yeah, that would be Chandelier.
Right.
I always forget about that effect.
Another good one would be something like Royal Blue, which which tax the opponent for having frozen Signy. Mm-hmm. Things like that. Those are the taxing effects I'm talking about.
So stacks tax.
Stacks tax. And then the other thing that they do that most control decks don't do, right? Most control decks actively attack the hand. Therefore, they're constantly attacking the board, so that way they can drive the hand and exhaust their resources, right? Stacks isn't doing that. Stacks is freezing and enter starving. And that's a completely different mindset. There's a completely different mindset between playing
It's
Nova.
it's a different part of the flow. Sorry to interrupt. It's a different part of the flow because
Often Stacks players are letting the opponent run themselves dry, whereas control decks are actively participating and trying to run them dry.
Ooh, gotcha.
And that's why I say Stacks is like waiting for the opponent to die of old age. You are literally
terrible.
You are all the extra stuff you do to try to make your opponent run out of resources sooner. You're basically not focusing on that. Instead, you're just focusing on existing and stalling. So it's absolute defense in that.
All right. So what colors kind of lend itself to that?
Oh, blue. Blue 100%. That's like blue's game plan.
Okay.
Like mono blue.
Mono blue, got it.
So Freeze Tamago does this. That's the key difference between Freeze Tamago and Nova. But the best example I could come up with as a card that you probably don't want to play in a control deck, but you really want to play in a Stacks deck is Chandelier.
Oh.
Chandelier has many effects. People forget that it has a taxing effect. It stops the opponent from casting spells unless they pay extra enter.
Yeah, spells cost one more. And outside of that, it's a 13, which is annoying.
It's got stats.
And then anytime it vanishes a Signy, it just goes straight into your trash.
It enter burdens the opponent, right?
Ugh.
So it is very good in that thing. It does everything a Stacks deck wants it to do.
Can you believe that came in the Card Jockey starter deck? Rude.
I know. Ugh. So that's what I think. You know, you can have a control deck with some Stacks elements. You can have a Stacks deck with control elements, and I think this is where you see some bleed and hybridization of some of the stuff. But this is also really good to know, like, oh, what is my deck really trying to do? And this could help you be like, I'm thinking of a control player mindset. I really should be thinking more of a Stacks mindset for Tamago. That might be able to help you more, you know?
All right. What's the last one?
Combo!
Combo!
So combo I left it out on this one because I've been thinking about it for a long time. Basically, ever since Replay Works put up a video being like, Lion is an aggro deck. It's not a mid-range deck. I'm going to challenge the notion here on this podcast.
Oh.
Challenging it, Anthony. I think it's a combo deck. And I think Wixoss has the weirdest version of combo I've seen in any game.
So combo in Wixoss is not the same as combo in Magic?
Or any of these other games, right? Often combo in all these other games are like, I don't really care how the game's progressing. My goal is to put some kind of thing where I can chain a reaction and win the game. Like Storm in Magic the Gathering is one of the best versions of combo. Although there's one-turn kills in Yu-Gi-Oh! As well. And just to diversify from always using Magic. Let's talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! For a second. Yu-Gi-Oh! One of the early ones was a deck called Mad Scientist. And what it did was it enabled you to basically search your deck, play a creature for free, summon a creature for free. And it will die immediately. But you played things that will basically allow you to chain sacrifices and damage your opponent with changing those sacrifices, and then boom, 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 oh, they're dead.
Gotcha.
Right? Wixoss doesn't really have that because it's gated in the fact that you can only attack with 3 Signy a turn, basically, and you only get 1 Elrig attack, and 4 is not 8. So it's hard to kill your opponent there. There would be ways to do it, and in fact, there isn't. I checked with shout out to Tetris here. Tetris is he's one of the best people in All-Star format. In All-Star, there's some ways to do it. And in All-Star, there's this really, really meme combo that looks awesome. But basically what it does when you put it together is you take your entire deck and you make sure it's either in your hand or your enter zone, so you have literally no cards in your deck. Therefore, you cannot refresh. That's the key. Right? And because you cannot refresh, there's a card that says, if you have 0 cards in your deck, when this trigger happens, you can up your Elrig. So you get infinite Elrig attacks.
Ew.
Yeah, it's super weird.
What is wrong with All-Star format?
But for the most part, this doesn't exist in Wixoss because of the limitations I said.
Mm-hmm.
So, but combo I think does exist.
Okay.
And I think it's alive and well in Wixoss, even in the Diva
And
format.
you think it's a lion deck?
I do. And here's why. The metaphor...
We're about to have another hot take from yours truly.
The mindset of a person who's playing combo should be like a chemist, combining ingredients probably to make a bomb. For you, Tiffany, you can make a potion. I know you want to be a witch brewing a potion.
Yep.
So there's your metaphor. This is how I'm making you on my side.
I want to be a witch.
The goal is to play sets of cards that can synergize with each other and create powerful game-winning results, right? So it doesn't have to be as so inclusive that I am playing card number 1 and card number 2, and with them combined, I auto-win the game. Mm-hmm. It can be, combo can be as simple as, I'm playing card number 1 and it's not that great. And I'm playing card number 2 and it's not that great. But together, they're better than all the cards in your deck. Right?
Okay.
And that differentiates itself from midrange, because midrange looks for individual powerful cards. Mm-hmm. So you're willing to play weaker cards as long as it gives you a really strong result together.
Okay.
Follow? Okay. So the main action is you're going to be putting cards together that, like I said, when you play them together, they end up with a really strong result to each other.
Okay.
Your secondary actions are going to be doing things like, there's 2 secondary actions. The first one is draw more cards.
Okay.
Right? The more cards you have in hand, the more you're able to put A plus B together.
All right. Lion does do that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the second thing is support your combo. That's a very vague secondary action.
Mm-hmm.
But in the terms of, for example, the deck that might go all in for the kill on one turn, and both of my examples, by the way, are from Card Jockey.
Right.
Example 1, in a lion deck, you might want to support it with being aggressive. Because you can only get 3 damage with Endless Punchline, so you want to support it with aggression so that you can get the rest of the damage, so that when you do your combo finish, you win the game.
Right.
In a deck like Wolf, you probably want to stem the bleeding at the start, because Wolf's combo is it wants to play Future Code and Endless Punchline in the same turn, so it can present 5 points of damage.
Right.
And if you play a removal spell as well, 6 points of damage in one turn. That's basically almost killing them in one turn.
Right.
So that...
Okay, that makes sense.
And yes, I could say enter charging is important there, but because Wolf does it on the turn it comes in, it's really not the enter that's important. It's the fact that you're going off with this combo. So Wolf probably wants to support it by maybe having some ramp, or maybe having some defensive stuff set up so that it can get to that turn 3 and just win the game on the spot. So that's why I'm stating a combo in Wixoss is different than what you think in other card games. Because you're not just going chaining, whoa, I win the game!
Right.
You're playing cards that are individually weak, but together synergize to each other to a higher degree. Another example would be Virtuals.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Virtuals,
that makes sense.
If you look at any virtual card, they're all pretty crappy on their own. Melissa's not a good card on its own.
Yeah.
It's just I think it's a 3,000, no, it might even be a 2,000. It's a 2,000 powered card that lets you mill the top of your library 3. Mm-hmm. The top of your deck 3. But it, when played with a lot of other virtual cards, is a 7,000 power level 1, which is amazing.
Yeah, which is, excuse me.
Yeah, or Fuyuki is terrible. card on its own. It does like a negative 1,000, I think, when it comes into play.
Fuyuki is the like fox one that says if there's another Signy on the field, it gets pumped, or is that a different one?
No, it's a different one. This is the one that it's a level black one that when it's like 1,000 or 2,000 power, and when it comes in, it gives something negative 1,000. That's it. But when you play it with Rena, you start chaining up to it, and Rena like gives you like upwards to negative 10,000 in one turn.
Yeah, that's
spread
right.
out the way that you want it with. Like, it's ridiculous how strong those are.
Yeah, that's
for
right.
free, by the way. So it's like that's the type of mindset that combo has here. Is you're playing individually. You don't have to play individually weak cards, but you can play individually weak cards if the sum of both parts is greater than the parts themselves.
Okay, cool.
So that's why
I can understand why Lion would skew a little bit, or I say Lion, but just like card jockey in general would skew a little bit more towards combo than mid-range.
Well, and this is why I would say it's not an aggro deck innately, and it's a combo deck innately. Is because if you're not playing any form of filtering in that deck, an endless punchline ends up being super mediocre. You lose the games.
Yeah.
Tiffany, you're the line player. How many games? What as a line player, where do most of your losses come from?
From not getting punchline.
Exactly.
It's so frustrating. Like, you could be literally about to win the game, and if your endless doesn't go off, you just lose. Like, now you're just waiting to lose. It's so awful.
And that's why I'm saying it's a combo deck, because yes, you want to win the games and you want to add some aggro to support your main plan, but your main goal isn't punch them down. Your main goal that you're doing at all points in times is filter your deck so that way you can endless punchline.
Yep.
Here's another random example of a combo cards I think that I would consider a combo package. You might not play them in a combo deck, you might play them in an aggro deck, but I still think they're a combo package together.
Is it Gap Bear?
Gap Bear could be considered a combo, so yes, I will agree with that. No, it's the Terra Beast package.
Oh yeah, no, definitely. There's a ton of synergy where the Signies are building up on top of each other to do like a big thing.
Yeah.
And you can repeat the big thing, like depending on who you have on your field or what you put back down and stuff like that. So yeah, the Terra Beast package is probably one of the first things I would think of.
Yeah, and I think that is that's sort of like a thing that you can say too, is like, look, not all tribal decks are combo decks, but they have a lot of combo tendencies in them. And if you're going full Terra Beast, for example, right, Buffalo plus Fennec. Buffalo on its own. Mm-hmm. You've played it. It's a terrible card on its own. If you don't have any of the things going for it.
It's very lackluster on its own.
Yeah, you said it yourself. You're like, I guess I have a 12,000 level 3 or a red enter, right? That's like what it is when it's not doing anything.
Yeah, it is like that.
But if you play that and then you play Fennec, you now, with 2 cards, have gained access to, first off, a 20k attacker and a 16k attacker. That's obscene.
Obscene is the correct word.
You get to enter charge, and you get removal, right? Mm-hmm. Like, those are just 2 cards, and you're doing so much with it, right? And that's where it's like what I'm saying. It's like a combo. Mm-hmm. So in Wixoss, you should when you're thinking about combo, you should narrow the scope from being this whole game-winning plan down to I'm doing some kind of combo flourish that's going to help me jetapult me, whatever the word I'm looking for is.
Catapult or
me.
Propel?
Propel, I like. Propel me into a very game-winning advantage. And that's where combo is. It's just like, just jumping the advantage gun. You're at 0 advantage and suddenly you're at 10 and the opponent's like, what is happening? Right? And you might not win the game on the spot there, but that you can ride that advantage the rest of the way to win.
Right.
And that's why I think that, for example, the Terra Beast stuff is a combo deck, or the stuff in Lion is a combo.
All right, so you're saying that most of the combos would end up being interactions between Signy and spells, and doesn't really have anything to do with the Loregs?
Well, I think you could. Yeah, you could do stuff with Loregs, right? Like, for example, Bang enter charges every turn and gives Lancer. Mm-hmm. So if you had Signies that were like, if you enter charged this turn, you can attack multiple times or something for every enter that you got this turn. I don't know, right? Then that would work with Bang as a combo, and it would lead you towards a combo deck. Now that insignia doesn't exist. I'm just making an example here.
Right. All right.
So what's your favorite?
What's my favorite?
So what's your favorite one?
Honestly, I really don't know. I can tell you which ones I don't like, but I like aggro. I like midrange. I think ramp is fun.
Mm-hmm.
And those would probably be my picks. What about you? I mean, we all know you love combo. Is there anything else?
I do like combo a lot. I like probably combo, aggro. I don't know if I like control. I often play control, but I don't know if I like it.
Please.
I think aggro and combo are probably my two favorite, to be honest with you.
All right. Selectors, let us know what your favorite, would you call them super archetypes?
Super archetypes.
Super archetypes. Let us know which one is your favorite or which one you like to play in the comment section down below. Also, please feel free to tell us if you think there's any other super archetypes that we may have missed. Or let us know if you think that Lion is in fact a ramp deck. Who knows?
It's a controversial.
Controversial.
Also, if I can add one, I think it would be great if you guys could tell me what you think are the strengths and weaknesses of the super archetypes.
Yeah.
So like what we were arguing with aggro. Does aggro play well against tempo? I don't know. Like that's one of those things where it would take a very certain type of like, all right, I'm gonna try to find this out. I'm gonna play 1,000 games, to figure it out. Where does control shine? Does control have a weakness? Is its weakness things like tempo and ramp? What do you think?
Let us know in the comments below.
And as always,
may you always flip a life burst.
Thanks, guys.
See you next time.